Welcome to Classics You Slept Through, the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who is definitely sitting there on the other side of the screen and is not a chimera, my sister, Meredith.
What is a chimera?
So it is either a mythological creature, which is like a body of a lion, head of a woman, tail of a scorpion. You've seen that before, right? It's sort of a freakish-looking creature animal thing. I think you can also use it as like just a general word meaning mythological, or I think Shelley uses it a lot because Frankenstein was assembled, so a chimera looks like it's kind of kludged together out of different parts. So I think similar to, I said it already, didn't I? I already said Frankenstein. It is Frankenstein's monster. We're gonna get so many people on the internet saying, "Well, actually, his name's not. He's Frankenstein's monster."
I will be one of those people.
We will be.
I will be one of the. I am.
I say in real life. Yeah, I say in real life, I am one of those people as well. So,
a chimera, a fire-breathing female monster with a lion's head, a goat's body.
Oh.
Why goat? Come on. And a serpent's tail. So she's awesome head and tail, but her body's kind of...
It's a goat. All right. Well...
Her body's kind of meh. Oh, man, that was a bad goat.
That was terrible. Good.
Yeah, it was terrible.
All right, well, if you haven't figured it out already, either by listening to us or maybe the podcast episode title when you clicked on this episode makes it pretty obvious as well. We are discussing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a book from originally first edition 1818, but I think we're reading the more updated 1836, I want to say, edition. Is that what we're reading?
Is it?
I think so. There are some minor differences between the editions she revised in between the original publication and the updated version that we're reading. Yeah, I'll have to look it up again. I don't remember exactly. I think it's about 1836 is the edition we're reading. Anyway,
there are plenty of editions and revisions, and
there are. I have a couple of notes. Yeah, I have a couple of notes on a couple of minor differences between the original and what we're reading, but we'll get to those as we go. Anyway, Mary Shelley and this little book that she wrote. Has she written any others? I don't even know. What do we know about?
That was such a man thing to say. Mary Shelley and her little book that stood the test of time since 1818. It's one of the most famous reproduced pieces of artwork ever. Mary Shelley and her little book.
It reminds me of there's a quote when Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Yeah.
I think he said something to the effect of, I won't get the exact quote off the top of my head, but something to the effect of, "So you're the one who wrote the little book that started this whole war," or something like that.
Yeah.
Good. That's a good one.
So you're just calling on Abraham Lincoln's misogyny. I don't know if he was a misogynist. I have a friend who would probably take issue with that.
I don't know.
Joke. These are the jokes, folks.
It's the opening of the show. I actually made a Lincoln joke at dinner tonight, and my wife gave me a look, and I said, "Oh, 150 years is too soon? I'm so sorry. I can't make a Lincoln joke." It was technically a Lincoln assassination joke, but anyway.
Oh, too soon.
Yeah, it was too soon. It was too soon. Anyway. All right, so all right, so we're going to talk a little Mary Shelley, a little Frankenstein. What do you got for us?
So, Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin Shelley, if you want to call her that, all of her last names, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, Mary Shelley. She's married to a famous romantic poet, Percy Bysshe Shelley. There's not an R in that, if it sounds like I made an R in his middle name, but there isn't one. Percy Bysshe Shelley, famous romantic poet, and she is surrounded by all of these famous writers. Famously, she writes this story, or starts this story, at a campfire, and they're telling spooky stories. And it's her and Lord Byron and Percy
Oh.
Bryce Shelley, and they're like, let's tell spooky stories. She comes up with the beginning of this one, and the others stick parts of their stories, like maybe at the end of a poem. It's not important, but she is the one who, first of all, is encouraged by her husband to continue to write this story. It was just a short story at the beginning, but that's where it is conceived and started. And she is the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, famous feminist women's rights. She
Oh,
wrote,
her. Yes.
yeah, she
Yes.
wrote Vindication of the Rights of Women.
Sorry, I don't know famous 19th century feminist writers. That's why you're here.
What is your problem? Why? A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. Very famous um, early feminist work. Her mom is like all about freedom and love and has illegitimate kids and illegitimate. She didn't think they were illegitimate. Anyway, Mary Shelley very much falls in line, although her mom dies early after Mary was born. Her dad takes care of her and instills in her, gives her great education, gives her all these liberal values. She marries Percy Bryce Shelley, and they have a little free love relationship going on. They have other people in their lives. I believe he gets her stepsister or half sister or somebody pregnant at
Oh.
some point, but she's cool with it. Anybody out there who's a Mary Shelley expert, if I'm getting this wrong, apologies. The Mary Shelley is a freak. She's awesome. She's great, I think. And she writes this. She's pretty young when she writes Frankenstein. She's like, it comes out in 1818. She's born, what, 1797.
Okay.
So she starts writing it
young. Yeah.
Yeah. But she has lost, I think she's lost definitely two children, but I think she loses her third in the writing of Frankenstein or by the time it's published. And she only has one child that survives, Percy Florence Shelley. So despite her young, literally like teenage age, she's gone through a lot.
Right.
And I can't even, I have not experienced such a thing, but I can't imagine. But she is encouraged to write this book. Her husband helps her edit it, makes notes, all of that. And for a long time, it was discounted. It was like, did she even really write it? I think her husband probably wrote it. Like, look at all these notes. And we've had some great historians who've gone back, research. People have done research and been like, you know what? This is actually just normal for someone who would have an editor make marks. So there's no reason to complain.
Books were not edited back then.
Yeah. There's no reason to say that, oh, maybe really we should question the authorship. No, she wrote Frankenstein. Her husband, famous author, also helped her edit it, as people do, as publishers do, totally normal.
Sure.
And it's stood an incredible test of time. And I love this book. I don't know if anybody can tell, but I'm going to vote that I stayed awake because this is like the fourth time that I've read it. So spoiler alert, I love this book. I'm interested to see what you think once we get to the end. But that's my really quick and dirty rundown on Mary Shelley. And I think for me, I'm going to get, especially after this, I'm going to get more of her works because this is like the one people read.
Oh, has she written other things? Oh, are there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dear.
She's written lots of other things. She's got a few novels.
So I wonder if she is more of the one-hit wonder like Bram Stoker, because his other works.
I don't see. That's what I don't know. I don't know if it's the element of her her life and her works a lot. Same with her mom. Well, her dad wrote what he thought was like a wonderful tribute to her mother after her mother passed in the form of a biography of sorts. But he told the truth about her and their like open love and other relationships and other children from other men. And he
You mean the
thought it
19th
was
century did
fine.
not appreciate that?
They didn't. They didn't.
How surprising. I'm shocked.
And there was even like poetry written about like what a terrible husband he was to have done this to her after her death, but he meant it as like a tribute to his wife who he loved, whatever.
Hey.
But she's got other books and I'm interested. I want to read them. I want to read them and find out. Like, were they repressed because she was this feminist woman's lib person and they were like, ooh, read it. I don't know.
Or, like we discussed last Halloween with Dracula, maybe the follow-ups were just terrible.
Maybe.
You know?
Maybe.
And they didn't survive the test of time.
We have to know. Frankenstein certainly has.
Yeah. Well, I think that context of her life and times and her parents, I think is a little interesting given old Victor Frankenstein's own upbringing and family situation, which I think would, I don't know, maybe is normal for the time, but as for modern readers, like, oh, okay. But we'll get to that as we get through this. All right, so this book kicks off. Oh, did you want to talk? You read the edition that had the opening, the forward, and something in the beginning, intro and forward.
Yeah, there's.
My edition did not have that.
Yeah, there's an introduction. An introduction and a forward. I'm not. What do you want to call it? I'm not sure. Let's see if I can find the your version that you read started off with the letter.
Right. It jumped right into the letters.
The first letter, yeah. Mine did too, but on Project Gutenberg, where I get most of these, I did find the one. Okay, so it's a preface. I wanted to get the words correct. Yeah. There's a preface and well, God, there's so many versions. A preface and introduction. Anyway, one tells the story of how it came to be, the campfire and the bet, or the whatever it is to write the story. And I remember when I studied the book in my undergrad, we also looked at it from a feminist perspective, and she had to make basically an excuse, like, here's why I'm writing it, because I'm a woman and this is what women, like, women aren't supposed to write like this, but here's why I am. And but I really like both of those, especially the story. I just love the idea that now famous authors who, I mean, not that she wasn't appreciated in her time, she apparently was. Her writing was taken seriously. And I think also that of her mother's was taken seriously at the time.
Okay. But
she does sort of make this like, well, they we were doing this thing and so I had to write it, and I know it's gruesome or whatever, but it was a scary campfire ghost story kind of thing. That's how I took it.
Okay, so it's just sort of being a little apologetic, like, if you don't like it, it's just kind of fun, and
I mean, that's what I was, when we looked at it from an academic standpoint, that's what we had discussed.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
So we could have our own take on that.
Okay. All right, well, let's get into this then. So the book opens, and I find this a little interesting because a lot of these books sort of from this era, I'm thinking back to Island of Dr. Moreau, and maybe even, when we read Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs, they have this sort of bizarre framing story that is sort of superfluous, right? Yeah. Island of Dr. Moreau, and both of them had basically the same framing story as someone who found someone's papers, and this was the story it told. This has the same thing. So the first 4 the first four letters, the first four sections of the book, which are these letters written by this Robert Walton to his sister Margaret, basically lead us into the story of Frankenstein. So he is getting, the book ends up being Victor Frankenstein telling Robert Walton his story, and then Robert Walton writing this down and sending it to his sister, which maybe they will come up again. You know, I certainly don't. I have a sneaky suspicion that Walton and his sister don't ever come into the story again. Maybe. I mean, I think there's... So it's sort of a superfluous framing device, but that's how it kicks off. So
I agree. I agree because I think, well, two things. I think, yes, if she had jumped in with the story of Victor Frankenstein, fine.
Right.
The fact that Victor is, well,
we'll get to the fourth.
In the letters, we first get who Walton is.
Right. The first three letters.
Feeling.
Right. The first three letters are literally just this Walton character and his story. So let's get into it here. The first letter is Robert Walton. He writes a letter to his sister Margaret, and in not good, but narration fashion of a character in a story or movie telling another character something that they already know for the benefit of the audience, i.e. us, or e.g. us, that, i.e. that is us. Robert Walton is telling his sister, well, as you know, I love to read these books about journeys to the North Pole, and so I'm going to make a journey. You remember that over the last couple of years, I've been trying to get to the North Pole? So sort of relating his own history back to his sister. So this guy, Robert Walton, apparently had an uncle who had a collection of books talking about attempts to reach the North Pole, and it became his sort of life's goal to do so, and he wants to do that. He has gone as far as hiring himself out on whaling expeditions, purposely hardening himself to the dangers and struggles of nature. He goes without food, he goes without sleep, just so he is going to be the hardiest, toughest sailor when he finally makes his attempt to the North Pole. And so, we have this book written in, originally 1818, as we said. These letters are dated, in kind of Mega Man fashion, 17 blank, so you can kind of fill in what year in the 18th century. We can date them a little bit, though, what year in the 18th century they are. We'll get to that as well. The actual North Pole, it was first discovery is attributed to Robert Peary in 1909, but later scientists have looked at his logs and looked at the speeds with he said he traveled, and they sort of cast doubt that he actually reached the North Pole. The first verified discovery of the North Pole, which is like academically,
you said
accepted.
1909?
1909. 1909, yeah.
Wow.
Was 1926. That was the first actual verified discovery of the North Pole, a flight over by a Norwegian guy. Yeah.
Santa's been there the whole time, and they don't find it till 1926.
We know on this podcast that 1926, it was actually, that's when Winnie the Pooh discovered the North Pole. So that was actually probably the first verified discovery of the North Pole.
Who better to invite? Santa was probably like, who should be here first? Pooh, a silly old bear.
Yeah, he found it.
No one will believe
so
him.
We know that. So anyway, so Robert Walton, he goes to St. Petersburg, Russia, and then up to the city of Archangel, and he's going to figure out the North Pole. And that's letter one, just sort of a little background on this Walton cat.
So let me get this straight. We know the North Pole exists at this time.
Correct.
Like, it's up there. Nobody's been there.
Nobody's been there.
And they want to see it and verify it. They think something's up there. And it takes until 1926 to verify that someone
Right.
is actually
Somebody's actually
Okay.
been there. They can mathematically say, yes, you were actually at
okay.
the North Pole. Yeah.
This is the Earth, by the way. This is
Yeah, that's
Earth.
it. That is.
Earth.
Yeah. See, now if they knew that it was flat, they could have found it a lot quicker.
Well,
It would have been anyway, but they didn't realize that back
point
then.
A to point B.
Exactly. So then we get into letter number 2. In this one, he has reached Archangel, and he's been there a few months, and he's assembling a crew, and but he's sad. He has no friends. You know, the crew. I mean, they're rough sailor guys. He's picking up in northern Russia.
Yeah.
You know, his lieutenant, yeah, dude's all right, but he's just out to make rank and come back to, I guess, to the British Navy and do well. He found a master for the ship who apparently is like the one kind master on the sea. And, you know, Walton is a kind-hearted man, so he doesn't want a guy that's going to impose harsh discipline on the boat. And then he goes into, again, this is sort of this bizarre, superfluous framing device. He goes into the full story of why this guy is like a kindly shipmaster. Because he loved this girl, wanted to marry her, but his dad said, you're too poor, so he goes out and he makes his fortune, and, buys a farm, and comes back to then say, oh, look, I've got all this stuff, can I marry her now? And the dad's like, yes, of course you can. But she says, you know what, though, dude? I don't love you. I love this other dude who is poor and my dad hates. And so the master says, I want you to be happy. I want you to marry because I love you. You should marry the man you love. So he says, I will leave England and not come back until you are happily married. In fact, all this wealth that I've acquired, I'm going to give it to that dude so he can marry you. And he
doesn't he like also like plead the case to the father?
I think the father
other guy?
liked him. I think the father was down with it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I mean, if
she
he's gonna
loved
give
the other
him
guy.
his wealth.
Right, yeah. Because the dad, I think the dad liked him better. But then he goes, he leaves England, he goes off to, sail in the northern seas of Russia, and then eventually he finds out later, some years later, that, oh, she did get to marry that guy after all, so it's all good. I don't know why Shelley included this random story of this guy, but hey, it's kind of nice, right?
It's to give you his character, his sympathy to the character, and he's a kind person, and he's really in it for it's his only thing in life. Like, why didn't this dude get married? What's he doing on this ship?
Exactly.
Why doesn't he have any friends?
Why is he a nice disciplinarian? Why is he the only nice disciplinarian I can find? Oh, because he's a kind-hearted man.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I like this guy. He seems like a good cat. Then we get 2 other like minor notes, not real big from this letter that I kind of pulled out. Is one, there might be sort of an anachronism in here. So we know this was written in 1818. Mm-hmm. But in his letter to his sister, Walton, remember these letters are dated 17 blank, so sometime in the 1700s, he writes a letter to his sister referencing a well-known poem that they both love, apparently. Right? He says, I'm not going to come back like the Ancient Mariner, which is a reference to Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Right, exactly. Which was published in 1798.
Okay.
So the window for this to be a well-known, well-loved poem between the brother and sister, who the brother has not seen the sister in 6 years, by the way, because he's been off doing his thing. At the minimum, these letters would have to be dated like 1799, and I guess they developed their love for this poem through letters while apart. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's not impossible, but
maybe it's just Shelley dropping her buddy Samuel Taylor Coleridge into her.
Well, it is because I discovered in going through this, the first revision of the poem, which was actually attributed to him, was 1817. So right before this book was published. Prior editions of the poem were all anonymous. So the 1817 revision which I guess is the most famous one that we're familiar with. Like if you looked it up today, it would probably be the 1817 edition. That's the first one that actually is attributed to him.
I was wondering, does her husband have any hand in like editing or anything like that? Since these I don't know. I'm looking quickly and I don't see anything that says like Percy Bysshe Shelley like helped out Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
Like were they friends? So they know each other kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean they were they're all famous romantic poets. Yeah.
They all swam in the same circles, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I
Bath.
Yeah. Yeah, they hung out at Bath together, of course.
Yeah.
I did like this quote though. So pulling out he's writing to his sister about how excited he is to finally get the boat together and get going, and he says there's danger, he's scared, but his excitement is going to overwhelm his fear because his excitement gets him to commence this laborious voyage with the joy a child feels when he embarks in a little boat with his holiday mates on an expedition of discovery up his native river. And I just thought, 3 men in a boat, what's up?
3 men in a boat.
It's just, it's all comes together in the pod.
Oh man! Yeah. If only they knew that you give up before you get to the end.
Exactly. Yeah, this guy was not bagging out and getting some meat pie in the inn before the end of the journey.
Once you find a floating suicide, you just gotta give up on the whole thing.
Right.
Oh man. Well, honestly, these letters are, I think, they are setting. As we'll learn once we get into the chapters, the letters are setting up Walton to be a sympathetic and kind ear to Frankenstein.
Correct. Yeah.
We're going to talk about he's about to meet. And not just sympathetic and kind ear, but someone who is embarking on a similar or is embarked and parked, frozen in ice, as we'll learn. On a similar expedition of passion of like, I must do this singular thing. And I don't know, we're going to get into it, but I think that is really what Walton's purpose is.
Yes.
And in this,
this we'll get into it in the fourth letter, but this is that recognition of that shared passion is kind of what induces Frankenstein to give his tale up to Walton as a cautionary tale. Like, don't let this consume you like it consumed me.
Yeah.
All right, third letter, not much to say on this one. Third letter is just a quick letter saying, hey, I'm on my way, and, we're kind of stuck in the ice, but it's sort of breaking up. We've been stuck in the ice, but it's starting to break up. There's some ice flows that are flowing past us a little bit. So things are starting to move. And that's kind of letter 3. So not really much to say there. But then letter 4, they see something on the ice. They see a sled go by while they're stuck there. And they mention there's a shape of a man and it's gigantic. But they're stuck and they can't go after him. Now, obviously, we know what this is, right? We're a little foreshadowing, but this is obviously Frankenstein. Oh, it's his monster.
No.
It's his monster. It's the monster. Yeah, I'm doing a Frankenstein monster thing there. It's okay.
Oh, that was purposeful. You're not an idiot.
It was. I was just trying to say that was a Frankenstein there on the boat. There's lots of.
That was a Frankenstein.
It was a Frankenstein. Well, the next morning they actually do find a Frankenstein. They find the Frankenstein. They find Victor himself. And he's over on the side of the boat. Frankenstein. And he's they're surprised because they're like, oh, it's a European man. It's not a savage, as we say in the 1800s. All right, buddy. If somebody's surviving out in the North Pole and you're hanging, whatever. But they realize it's a European guy. They bring him aboard. only because they tell him, yeah, we're going north. And he's, oh, you're going north? Well, yeah, let me come aboard. They mentioned they saw the sled, and they start to chat. It takes, this section kind of goes on for a little while. Frankenstein is very reticent to speak. He doesn't say anything. He's gaunt. He's very drawn. They kind of nurse him back to health a little bit. And eventually he sees Walton's own obsession with the North Pole. And this kind of haunts him. And because he has his own obsession, which has brought him to this point of ruin. And so finally he breaks down and says, okay, let me tell you my story. And they sit down. And then chapter 1 begins, and we actually commence the story of Frankenstein. So, let's get into that. Anything else on the letters you want to say before we actually move into the story itself?
No, I think I was just trying to imagine what it's like to be Walton, to sit there and you're stuck and you're really excited about this thing that you're going to do.
He's got a new friend.
And somebody comes on board and is like, I'll talk to you. I'm not one of these surly sailors. And he thinks he's met like
an equal,
a buddy. And the buddy is like, don't do the thing that you're going to do. Don't do it. Just learn from, may it not be a serpent to sting you like mine. I think he says. And it's like, what? If I were Walton, I'd be like, dude, I just met you. You don't know nothing about me. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to go into the North Pole. But he's basically Frankenstein has decided to use his strength that he's regained to convince Walton to not do the thing that he's dedicated his whole life to, which you're stuck on a boat in ice. And now you've got like a TikTok commenter telling you not to do what you've been doing your whole life. I don't know. It's just interesting to think about how would you actually feel? How would Walton actually feel? Because he's really, as we're going to see, we get into the first chapter, he's really dictating as best he can the story that he's told without a ton of commentary of his own.
Right. There is, which is interesting, there is a little bit of a fourth wall break. Well, fourth wall. Walton, no. Does Walton come back and speak?
Well,
there's a point, or does Frankenstein speak to, he speaks to Walton.
He speaks to Walton, and Walton writes it down as that. Yeah.
Right, yeah. There's a point there where that happens in chapter 4. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, I don't think it happens, but I think this would be an interesting time if Walton were an unreliable narrator. I think that would be kind of cool. Like if Walton like got some of the details wrong. You know what I mean? Like I don't think this happens in the book, but I think that would be an interesting, and it would give a reason for the framing story.
In the reality of the world,
right?
Like, were these people real and this was nonfiction? Then of course we're all unreliable narrators of our own experience to pull from my work life and my boss and things like that. But there's no indication in the book that we should distrust what he's saying. Although the fact that he's like, I write these after he's done telling, it's not like he's writing while
he's not a stenographer.
Journals after, and he writes as best he can what word for word what he remembers from the story that was recounted. So I don't know.
So I think
can you imagine what his sister was probably like, wow.
I don't. What is this? Yeah, it's bizarre, dude.
Stop writing me these
stuck
letters.
On the ice for a while, aren't you? Anyway, so we get into chapter 1 here. So, little Victor's life. It starts out. So he's Swiss. He's from Geneva. His father he actually starts with his father's story. So before he's born. So this is actually like second and third hand because he's telling his father's history, which he obviously wasn't there for. And we're getting that filtered through a letter from Walton to his sister. So, but his father is friends with this guy, Buffo, and he ends up, his buddy loses his wealth and ends up in Lucerne. And he's really embarrassed, and he's like, I'm poor now. I don't want to see you. But Frankenstein's dad, Alphonse, wants to still find his friend, so it takes him 10 months. He finally finds him. I was very excited because it does name check the river and I think even the bridge in Lucerne, and I have been on that bridge and crossed that river. It's kind of cool. It's this old wooden
Look at
bridge.
you.
I know, right? It's this old wooden bridge across the river there in Lucerne. Anyway, that was
I'm
just
still
a
hung
little
up on the
fun.
name Alphonse Frankenstein.
I know, right?
What a name.
Oh, I know.
Wow.
I mean, she was 19, right, or 20. She didn't have great names.
She's like
She made
17.
yeah. So anyway, so it takes a few months, 10 months or so. His dad finally finds his friend, and his friend has a daughter, and his friend is so despondent. He's not working. He's sort of wasting away, and his young daughter has taken up work to kind of support the family. The friend dies, and then Frankenstein's dad sort of adopts. This is where it starts to get a little sketch.
Always.
Always adopts his friend's daughter. Very kind of him, you don't want to
Sure.
stick her in the poorhouse. And then 2 years later marries her. So that's like you do. Exactly. So I mean, the age difference between these guys already is, we're talking 25 years minimum, right? Maybe 20 back then. I don't know. There's an age difference anyway, we'll say. But they moved to Italy. They like to travel. So apparently Frankenstein's dad is quite wealthy. They travel around a lot. Young Frank is born in Italy. His parents love him. They just shower him with affection. But mom always wanted a daughter. So in sketchy move number 2 from the first chapter, she is, they're in Italy, and she's just kind of help the poor, right? She's there.
Right. She's the Angelina.
Right, exactly. Exactly. She's helping out this family, and she sees the family has this really pretty little girl, and she's like, ooh, kind of want that. And
She doesn't match the rest of you. Does she really belong to you?
right, and the old woman goes, oh, you like that little girl? I can't take care of all these kids. And she's not even mine anyway. I took her in from somebody else. Why don't you take her?
You should take her.
Exactly. So she does. Brings the little girl home, and I thought this was a fun tidbit. Dad shows up from a trip or something, and all of a sudden there's a little, hey, we have a daughter now. Great.
I mean, she couldn't text like,
This is true.
got girl one. See what?
Yeah. See,
Check it out when
found
you get home.
one. Yeah.
Found female version.
Exactly. But anyway, so young Elizabeth becomes an adopted sister to Frankenstein, and is very, very wonderful, and will get problematic later with her as well, being raised in the same household. But, whatever. They're
not related.
They're not related. They aren't, but they're raised together. This brings up one of the first kind of fun differences. I don't know if this makes this more or less problematic, but in the original version, in the 1818 version, Elizabeth was Frankenstein's cousin.
Mm-hmm.
It was the daughter of his dad's sister, and she dies. The sister, the aunt dies, and so the dad naturally takes in the cousin, which
Right.
seems a more natural way to get Elizabeth into the story, as opposed to baby stealing from a poor person in Italy. But
I'm so glad you pointed that out, because as I was reading this, I was like, oh yeah, like he marries his cousin, or falls in love with his cousin or whatever, and they're best friends and as kids. And then when it wasn't, I was like, oh, I must just be a jerk assuming that everyone in this time period is marrying their cousin. And that's not true. And look at me with my like,
well, do you know why they did?
modern
Do you know why they do that? I mean, number one, it's because your social circle is pretty small and you don't know very many people. But you keep the money in the family.
Yeah.
You're not introducing another family to steal your wealth. You're keeping it all within your clan, so to speak. Anyway,
if you
so
don't
that's
have any money, then you're free to not marry a relative.
you can marry whoever you like. It's kind of
Isn't
freeing.
that so lucky? It's one of the
It's
charms of poverty.
exactly. All right, so that's chapter 1. Anything else you want to bring up for chapter 1 here?
No, I don't think so. I
Okay.
mean, I think it's worth mentioning. Well, I think in books like this, these old classics, especially romantic period, there's always like this character who is beloved. So Elizabeth is
Yes.
beloved by everyone. She is perfect in every way. She's beautiful. She's upright. She's virtuous. She loves all the right things. She does all the right things. She cries at the right time. She's tortured by the right things. She is just perfect. She's presented as perfect. And even in her imperfections, they're perfect also, if she has any, you know? So
Yeah.
that's Elizabeth in general.
Which is interesting,
And,
given that this book is written by a woman, and as I've learned at the beginning of the podcast, the daughter of a famous feminist, and yet the Elizabeth character, probably the only major female character in the book, is just sort of there.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, product of the times,
and
maybe, but still.
Yeah. And he said Elizabeth, she, like his mother, she presented Elizabeth to me as her promised gift. I, with childish seriousness, interpreted her words literally and looked upon Elizabeth as mine.
Yeah.
Mine to protect, love, and cherish. Of course, yes. But still,
sure.
the idea of ownership and whatever.
Right.
And all of that. But.
Well, as we learned, similar time period with Northanger Abbey, writing a female character with agency doesn't get your book published. So I don't know, maybe Shelley had to write Elizabeth this way.
We'll see what happens to Elizabeth. So
yeah.
Let's just
all right, going. Yes. We'll continue on. All right. So we get into chapter 2. Victor and Elizabeth, they grow up together. He eventually, his parents do produce a brother for him, and they move. And when that happens, they decide we need to settle from this wandering, traveling lifestyle. So they wind up in Geneva again. Victor begins to go to school and meets his buddy Henry. They become real good friends. Henry is this wonderful, virtuous, loving foil to Victor's passions. So Victor gets very hot and passionate, and Henry is kind of the cooling influence in his life.
I love it. Henry loved enterprise, hardship, and even danger for its own sake. He was deeply read in books of chivalry and romance, and he wrote songs. And he was like, "I'm the science guy." Henry, he's the romantic.
Yeah, he's the romantic guy.
Yeah, he's the romantic guy.
Yeah. But they go on a family vacation, and this is where Victor's trouble kind of starts, because in their Airbnb they stay in, there's a bunch of books, and so they're snooping on the shelves. It's raining one day, he's bored, and he starts picking up all these books on natural philosophy, and he starts reading Agrippa and Paracelsus. Is that how you say it? I'm not even sure. How did you say it? This is your chapter.
How did I say it? I probably said it
Paracelsus? Paracelsus? I don't know.
Paracelsus, anyway. Paraclesis, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do not remember.
And old Albertus Magnus. So he starts reading these guys who are these ancient guys, right? So they are not expounded upon in the book, so I went ahead and checked these guys out. They're kind of interesting cats. So the first guy, Agrippa, he was early in his life, at least in his 20s, and so he was into the occult, and so he wrote 3 books on magic and demons and whatnot.
Magic with a C or magic with a K?
C. They just wrote it in the thing. I don't know. It's Wikipedia. But
I've learned there's a difference.
There is, yes, I know. But he defended witches, so women that were accused of witchcraft, he came to their defense, which apparently that made him sketch back in those days, of course.
So he defended witches, or he defended women accused of witchcraft?
Well, women accused of witchcraft, yes. So he defended women accused of witchcraft. But later in his life, he sort of recanted his writings and was like, yeah, I wrote that stuff when I was young, but there's nothing to it.
We do.
That's what you do.
Who doesn't go through a magic witches phase?
Right. I was into the occult. But anyway, he was a German guy. Then the next guy, the Paracelsus, whatever, how do you say his name? He's a Swiss guy. He was actually a doctor, and apparently a very trailblazing doctor, responsible for a lot of advances in medicine. But there's like rumors that maybe he dabbled in the occult as well, but there's no. But he is apparently a very famed and revered, but renowned and respected for his contributions to medicine.
Okay.
And so there are some folks that think the accusations of the occult were unfounded, and some that. So who knows? Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. He didn't leave any writings like Agrippa did. The last guy, Magnus, he's actually a Catholic saint. Right. He was the same. Also, I think a doctor as well, and very famous. And maybe he wrote about alchemy. We don't know. Maybe the writings, which were attributed, or at least had his name on them, they say that the writing style doesn't quite fit, and it doesn't seem like it was his writing. Maybe it was like
Sounds like some Catholics would say.
Yeah, maybe some dude was just sort of, trying to trade on Magnus's fame, and
And it wasn't him.
it may not have been him. So, but he's a Catholic saint, so I don't know. But anyway, so these are the guys that Agrippa, or that Victor is reading and getting these ideas in his head. He's started getting interested in this stuff. But then he sees some lightning. Like they're at this place, and a friend of the family's theirs, and a lightning hits near them. And the friend basically explains electricity to him and what lightning is, right? And Victor's like, oh, all these guys I've been reading, they suck. They don't know what they're talking about. Look at this. This is cool. This is science, man. And he sort of gives up his readings.
Well, but wait, there's an intermediary thing, which I think, as parents, is pretty important. Is that
I was going to bring this up. I was going to bring this up.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was going to bring this up.
He reads these things, and then he tells his dad, look at this.
Yeah.
These are the books that I found. Cornelius, Agrippa, and Burrus Magnus. This is amazing.
Right.
And his dad looks at them carelessly and says, ugh, Cornelius, Agrippa.
You're reading that
My
crap.
dear Victor, don't waste your time. This is sad trash. And he's like, well, I'm going to fully invest in it then. He's like, if my dad had, explained it to me and told me that everything had been, quote, entirely exploded and that there was something more than this, then cool. But he didn't. And so I decided that I would just, go in deeper with this. So parents, beware of what you cast down.
Exactly. The book says, quote, he says, if instead of this remark, as the father saying that it's sad trash, don't read it, if he had taken the pains to explain to me that the principles had been entirely exploded, and that a modern system of science had been introduced, which possessed much greater powers, then I should have certainly thrown Agrippa aside and have contented my imagination. And he would have gone back to studying science. So that's right, parents. When your kids ask you a question, don't just say, because I said so. Explain it to them and explain why they should or should not do what they're doing.
Even if they don't understand at the time.
Exactly.
Do it anyway.
Exactly.
And little did his dad know, all he had to do was be like, lightning. Ta-da!
Well, so this is an interesting point. So that quote we just read is sort of blown up by the original edition. And I think this is probably the reason why the change. The original edition, the 1818, instead of Victor seeing the lightning blow the tree up and the family friend explaining electricity, the father gives him a demonstration of electricity, and that makes him go, oh, all right, these guys, I don't need to listen to them.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool. So by making that change, Shelley kind of reinforces that Victor's dad was just like, whatever, man. Don't read that garbage.
Yeah.
So it kind of bolsters that character.
Oh no. She's like, I don't want him to be too good of a dad.
Right, exactly. So then we get to chapter 3. He's now older. We have a little time jump. He's ready to go to college. But then Elizabeth, she gets scarlet fever. Victor's mom says, I'm going to take care of her. Victor's mom gets scarlet fever, and then she ends up dying. So he's kind of sad. And so
I felt that as a mom. Don't you feel that as a parent? Like your kid is sick, and they're like, don't go in there. Just don't.
Right, yeah.
Don't
but you have to go
attend
in
to
there.
your
Somebody's
sick
got to go
child.
in there.
And she's like, oh, okay, I'll try. And then she can't help herself, and she goes and helps her kid.
Exactly.
And her kid survives, but then she gets sick.
She
and
dies.
she should have listened. You should have stayed on lockdown. That's what you should have done.
Mom should have worn a mask. Exactly. But she didn't. She got the scarlet fever.
Anyway.
So we get some tragedy in Victor's life, and so exposing him to a little death, which I guess can foreshadow, later his studies. But as she's dying, she says, and this is, Mom, I don't know. She has raised these children since they were 4, 5, something like that. And, for 10 years or so, more than 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
Raised them as siblings. And she says, I want you guys to get married. That's her deathbed wish.
As you do.
That's just...
I mean, back then, I guess you did.
I guess. That's just a little weird, but that's... So she gives him the clearance. Hey, you can marry your adopted sister. That's cool. I'm down with that, man.
We shouldn't say that happens today.
Does it?
It's just not necessary. I mean, your wife told me a story the other day of a family that she's working with and helping, and the family was like,
she did?
She did.
She's
and
asleep.
she said that the woman was like, and they're just new to the country, and she was like, oh, I'm getting married, and she was like, oh, like you met someone that fast?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
who are they? And she's like, it's my cousin.
It's my cousin. Okay, that's Middle Eastern. Come on,
I'm just saying it happens
how you
today.
do. Everybody
Don't be
does.
so white American centric. People do it.
They do.
It's not
they
necessarily quote unquote weird.
This is true. I get it's. Hey, it's legal in Pennsylvania, y'all. You want to marry your first cousin? You can do it.
Good news.
You can do it.
Pennsyltuckians.
Exactly. Marry your first cousin if you like. It is legal. All right. Why I know that? Don't ask, but I know. All right. So anyway, so he finally gets to college, and he meets two of his professors here. He meets old Krempy, M. Krempy, his natural philosophy teacher. This guy is hearth, uncouth. He's kind of a short, little, stocky loser. Kind of hates him because he asks, he's like, so what have you been reading, man? And he says, oh, professor, I've been reading Agrippa. You've been reading that garbage? You wasted all your time. If you had, actually used all that time for something else, you'd been a lot better off.
He goes hard. He's like, every instant that you've wasted on those books is entirely and utterly lost. Good God, what desert land have you lived?
You have burned your memory with exploded systems and useless names.
So extreme. Man. Can you imagine? You're all wide-eyed and like, I'm in college. I'm gonna meet professors, and they're so smart, and they're gonna teach me things. I remember as a grad student.
Well, here's the thing, though. This is I found this bizarre, right?
What?
So
bizarre.
He's like 18, right, or so. He saw the lightning when he was 15, and he gave up Agrippa. He meets his professor. His professor says, hey, what have you read? He's like, well, I used to read Agrippa when I was a kid. His professor lights into him and says, no. Here's the reading list you really need, right? And he says, I returned home not disappointed. He was happy. He's like, they gave me the books I should be reading. This is great. Mm-hmm. He says, for I had long considered those authors useless. Well, dude, why did you even bring it up? Like, if you're like,
why don't you
I
preface with like, I
used to read this stuff, but I don't believe it anymore. Oh, okay, fine. Well, here, read this stuff instead. Instead, he goes, you've been wasting your time with it. It's like, dude, I haven't read that since I was 15. That was years ago, man. Like, cut me some slack, you know?
It just makes me think when I was a grad student, I was a new grad student and I was so excited and I had a whatever they called it, like it wasn't a
Your advisor?
TA, it wasn't a teaching assistant, but I was like a GA, it was a graduate assistant.
Yeah, grad assistant.
I was assigned to Professor Chohan, who was like 80 billion, and I hadn't had him for any classes, and he was like genius, well renowned, everybody loved him, but he was old school Indian, old school, and I was in his office one day and he's asking me to do things, and I have like, it's summer, I don't know, my tattoos were exposed.
Oh no.
And he was like, so like, what do you want to do with your life or whatever? I don't know what the exact question was. And I was like, well, I want to be a professor. I want to teach English at the college level, and that's why I'm here and that's what I'm doing. And he laughed at me. Belly and he was like a round squat little man, just like M. Crump.
Hey.
And he laughed at me and he was like, ha ha ha, picturing you in front of students.
Oh like, man.
I'm like, I was like, dude, you can't even make copies. That's why I'm here. You can't even make copies. Like, what? Bring it. But he laughed at me.
Wow. I luckily never had those experiences. We knew what we were doing after college, so we just did it. It's fine. What are you doing? I'm going back to work. That's what I'm doing. Anyway.
That was my M. Crump.
Oh, very good. Well, he also meets Waldman, his other instructor, who's going to teach him chemistry. And same thing, but he loves him, but he also gives him a big reading list and some books. So he's all excited. He's got all these great things. And this is where I'm just very confused, because at this point, Victor says he hates natural philosophy because it's small-minded. Even though he's given up these ancients, he still respects them because he's like, look, they were wrong and they were doing dumb stuff, but at least they had big ideas. They were trying
they dreamed big.
Right. These guys, the modern guys, they just kind of stick with what they know, and that's kind of it.
They've been deflated by actual science and real possibility.
Right.
They're like, oh, you can't just drink from a fountain of youth or the spark of life. You can't just find. There is no alchemy to produce, And they've given that up for literal, actual, provable science. And he's like, bah, where's the big dreams?
Well, you know why the alchemy doesn't work, right?
I don't.
They never caught any Smurfs.
It's true.
So that's why they could never get the alchemy to work. They needed to catch a Smurf for that. So,
man.
Anyway. And the difference between Waldman and Kremp is, where Kremp just kind of takes a dump on all this reading that he's done, Waldman says, hey, I cool. like that you've read it because, look, these guys were wrong, sure, but if they hadn't have pushed the science ahead, we wouldn't be where we are today. So, they had to do those things to get us past that into the knowledge that we have now. And, as a modern reader, reading a book written in 1818, doctors didn't even wash their hands back then. But these guys are all snotty and snooty about how modern and progressive and smart they are and how much they know about science. It's like, bro, you don't even wash your hands before doing an operation. So I don't want to hear it. Like,
the idea of like germ theory when it came out, and the idea of like, there's little invisible things that you can't see, but they make you sick, but you can't see them.
It took 50 years for doctors to wash their hands. They did not want to wash their hands.
Because it doesn't make any sense that little invisible things.
And it inconveniences the doctor. Like, I don't want to wash my hands if I don't have to. I'm a doctor. That'll take an extra 5 minutes. I'm not doing that.
I'm trying to just convince my 5-year-old to cover when he coughs, and he's just like your face, like, let me sneeze in your open eyeball. I'm like, how do I teach you? How do I teach you to cover? Just cover. It's important. Nope. Doesn't make any sense. Why would I cover?
Not at all. All right, so then we get into chapter 4, the last chapter we read for this section. And we kind of get
an important chapter.
It's a big one. So we get another time jump. So it's I guess it's the chapter. I was shocked it's happened already, that it's kicking. Like this first section is going so slow. Like we got to learn about the master of the boat, of the guy that's writing the letter that's listening to Frankenstein's history. We got to get that in. But now all of a sudden, chapter 4, we're rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
So Krempy is he's
I'm sure it's not just Kremp and the E is
it's
silent.
Probably
Krempy. Sounds like a
Krempy.
freaking donut.
It does say, well, it looks like Krispy Kreme because it's KR, so I'm just like, I am thinking of that. So he's still a jerk after 2 years. He's still a dick. And apparently Frankenstein respects his knowledge. He's a smart guy. He loves learning from him. But it says, Professor Krempy often asked me with a sly smile how Cornelius Agrippa went on. Like, literally a comment this dude made to him the very first day. 2 years later, he's still like, oh, hey, Frankenstein, how's that Agrippa coming, man? Like, do you know what it reminded me of? You're an Office fan, right?
Yeah.
It reminded me of Andy Bernard, like 4 seasons later, still calling Jim Tuna. But completely unironically, like, hey, Tuna, and you're just
hasn't caught on. No one else does it.
If you didn't watch like the season when Jim was in Connecticut, you'd have no idea what he's talking about, why he's called. But they kept it going through the whole thing, and it wasn't funny. It was just sort of like, dude, are you still doing this? And that's how I felt with Krempy here. He's just like,
I feel like
you're like, dude,
I think Kremp is like Professor Narddog.
Exactly. Yes. It's like, dude, I mentioned Agrippa the first day, and I told you I hadn't read it since I was 15. You're still going on about Agrippa. Come on, man. Let it go. But Waldman, he's getting close to. They're becoming kind of friends. And there's this interesting comment in the book that I really found strange, where Frankenstein is describing why he loves studying science so much, right? Mm-hmm. He says, in other studies, you go as far as others have gone before you, and there's nothing more to know. But in a scientific pursuit, there is continual food for discovery and wonder. And I just thought, that's literally impossible, because then nothing would ever advance past what it was the person that first discovered it. Like, it doesn't music and art and dance progress? Like, we have new artistic techniques. Like, we're not still scratching cave paintings, right? Somebody eventually made paint, and we learned painting techniques, and we learn from other things. Like, is that
it's a good topic of conversation, because I mean, even though you've learned different painting techniques, are you not still using some sort of tool to put some sort of pigmented liquid onto some sort of surface?
Unless you're doing digital art. Now you're making a new tool, and you're progressing.
Still a tool to make pigment, make a thing.
Think about graphic design. Now you've gone from painting and sort of the Dutch masters to crazy 3D billboards in Japan that, look like they're going to fall out of the side of the building. I mean,
have new notes been discovered, or are the notes that we have and the scales that we have all of the notes and the scales that we have? Like, even in the modern digital age where we can make all kinds of crazy sounds,
we combine them in new ways
to the same. Yeah, but it's like,
think about the synthesizer in the 70s that created new sounds, new ways of creating music. And
did they still adhere to the same basic notes? I don't know, but like, in dance,
I would love Beethoven to meet like Eddie Van Halen or something and see what happens, like,
he'd be like, what?
Show him what he can do. Well, it'd be loud enough, he probably could hear it. Show him what he could do, and look what music is now, and think about music from the 40s, and you're like, oh, this is kind of simple, and then how rock and roll developed, and how what we have now, and how it continues. And so I don't think it's.
But it's not. But it's still notes. It's still music, right?
But you're creating new ways of using that.
But like when science, and look, I'm going to show my ignorance here, but like when scientists discovered like quantum physics, and there was something smaller than an atom, and then they could break that apart, and like they're like, if they actually discover that the strings in string theory are real and they can show them to you, like these are discoveries that literally no one's ever seen before or thought of. Should they discover like thousands of insects a year? There are so many insects, like brand new species that nobody's ever seen before. That's bonkers.
Yeah.
Bonkers.
Long way from guys just like drawing pictures in notebooks when they go to the Galapagos,
Yeah. Look at this finch. Look at this finch. Look at this one. Look at this finch.
But yeah, I kind of take issue with that. I don't think it's you go as far as others have gone before you. I think you take those ideas, and then you create it with your own. You add your own ideas and you put your own spin on things. And think about movie making, or we're not still doing sort of
there's the argument that there's
herky-jerky silent films. I mean, we've created new ways of storytelling and new ways of pushing
but there's the argument of that there's only, paraphrasing here, 6 stories to tell, and every story is a variation of those 6 to 8 types of story. Like, boy meets girl, falls in love with girl, loses girl, it's like, and every story can fit into this very basic type of thing. There is that theory out there. So like, even though you've got a new medium or a new way, you're still telling the same story that's been told.
Boy meets girl, boy creates monster, boy loses monster. I mean, is that one of the 6?
Then marries his monster cousin. I don't know.
Exactly. Right. I don't know. Anyway, I kind of disagree with old Victor on this one. But he just becomes, during his studies, it just sort of happens. He becomes interested in the body and anatomy and physiology, and he starts studying the way the body operates and moves, and he starts to study life. He wants to discover, and he says, in order to study life, you must know death. And he says, my parents, they never told me scary, spooky stories. I was not superstitious. So I was not afraid.
Bodies was fine.
I was not afraid to go down to morgues and cut open old bodies and look at decay. And in order to discover what makes life, I have to look at how things decay and die so that I can make it anew.
You don't have to be afraid of ghosts to find that aversive. You don't have to think like,
no.
Oh, zombie's going to wake up and eat my brain.
Not at all.
Oh, I'm just going to dig in this person's
Still kind
guts.
of gross and creepy. And,
yeah.
And as we know now, probably germ-filled and dangerous to actually be doing.
Yeah.
But I just found it interesting here. It's just sort of, he just sort of casually, I decided I want to make life. It was not like, it was just all of a sudden like, we're doing this now. Okay. Like one paragraph to another. Oh, okay. He's just telling us he wants to make life now. Great. Okay. Sounds good. And then we get a little bit of a first person shift. Now we go to, this whole time Victor has just been sort of telling his story. Now he talks directly to Walton and says, I discovered how to create life, but I'm not going to tell you, obviously, because of what happened when I discovered it. So just trust me when I say I discovered how to create life, and we'll move on from there.
Don't ask me to.
Exactly.
Don't ask me to tell you.
I'm not going to, So he now, again, is just sort of like, oh, he can create life now. Great. He can do that, but he doesn't have a body to put that life into. So now he has to, the easy part was discovering how to create life. The hard part is putting a body together to hold it. So
was he looking for that, or did he literally like, I've read all this different stuff and I'm doing this, and oh my God, I think I've discovered. an astonishing secret?
That's a good question. I think he did sort of say it just sort of happened, right? He was studying. Um, he loved the body. He sort of got into the body.
He said, "Whence I often ask myself, uh, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which I'd never considered as a mystery. Yet, with how many things are we upon the brink of becoming acquainted if cowardice and carelessness did not restrain our inquiries?" So
Yeah.
he's like messing with these bodies, and he's particularly attracted to the human frame, and he's thinking like, man, I wonder how life happens. How's life created? And instead of being like, well, that's crazy, I'm not gonna think about that or like discover that, he's saying like, I then decided, okay, I'm not going to strain myself. I'm going to go towards that.
Right.
And then suddenly he had been animated by, quote, an almost supernatural enthusiasm. And so
Yeah.
then he just fully immersed himself.
Yeah. It just kind of says he sort of figured it out. Yeah.
Literally a discovery. Like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, look at that.
And he doesn't and he says he doesn't remember how he got there. He went through all the steps, and at the end he's like, "Oh, the discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliterated, and I beheld only the result." So he went through all this trial and toil to get to this point, and then once he got there, he's like, he only remembers the good things, right? Like he didn't remember all the
Yeah.
hardships and steps that got him there. But now he doesn't know how to something to put it into, so he begins to assemble a body. And I guess because the human physiology is so complex, he decides to make it big so he can, like, I guess more easily work with it, which makes sense to me. You kind of scale it up before you build a big model before you scale it down. I mean, it's how technology works, right? Computers used to take up an entire room, and now we have microchips that fit on your fingertip, so you scale it down eventually. So he starts to put a body together and makes it big, but it's so difficult to assemble a body. He has to go real slow. It's a painstaking, laborious process. And his goal, he thinks eventually, like, if I can do this, if I can put this life into this body, eventually maybe I will either create a new species of, I guess, reanimated people, or I can bring people back from the dead. Like, I'll have figured out how to do that. So he kind of starts to talk about all the things that he does. Like, he begins to ignore his family and friends. His family notices. They're like,
fully
hey,
immersed.
You have not been writing to us. And his dad's like, I'm guessing if you're ignoring writing to me, you're ignoring your studies, and I'm not cool with that. He forgets to eat. He starts to grow thick, thinly and sickly. And he just this overwhelming goal and desire is just turning him into a complete wreck.
Yeah.
And so
he has this great I think it's great, and again, this could be a fourth wall break. It could be also Mary Shelley coming through with some, because some critics have said that readers of the day missed like any political agenda or anything she was trying to put through with this.
Okay.
But he's immersed in this, and then he comes out and he gives this like little, right at the end of the chapter, he says, people must always preserve a calm and peaceful mind and not allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb your tranquility. And he's like, and I don't think now that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception. And then he says, if the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections and destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful. That is to say, not befitting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections, so he's ignoring his family, blah, blah, blah.
Right, sure.
Greece had not been enslaved. Caesar would not have spared his country. America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. Like, she's an English writer, and she's like, if people weren't crazy for the discovery, crazy for this thing, and he's, you know, he's speaking to specifically someone who's got crazy for going to the North
Discovering
Pole.
the North Pole, right.
And quote unquote, the discovery would have happened, but more gradually, and maybe we wouldn't have decimated populations that were already here. That's clearly a little like political, like,
sure,
like Easter egg she's thrown in there. And then he's like, I'm moralizing.
Yeah.
And your face is telling me I should stop and just go on with my story. Like, you don't look like you're interested in my political views or my moralizing or my agenda here.
That's pretty tough for a 19-year-old kid to kind of throw in the book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have long said, like, I'm not an ambitious person, and I don't understand ambition.
Me either, really.
Right? And so, like, I look at these world leaders. I mean, right now we're a month or so into, you know, Russia invading Ukraine, and I just go, why? Like,
yeah, me too.
Putin, go ride your horse. You're rich, dude. Just go,
Seriously.
like, retire. Or, you know, a few years ago when the Arab Spring was happening and all these Arab dictators were, like, trying to hold on to power, I'm like, you guys are, like, filthy rich. Just, like, go to Monaco and get a beach house and play video games and read a book, man. Like, what? So I've never understood, like, power-hungry people and ambition. And, like, man, once you've made it and you've got the money, like, just go chill.
Stop.
Do what you want. Like, I don't know.
It's weird that what you want to do is cause you and the rest of the world stress, grief, pain, tragedy. Like,
right.
For what?
It's weird that you want to sort of virtue signal that you pay $15 an hour just so you can force all your competitors to pay higher rates so you can buy them up and crush them, Amazon. It's just weird, you know?
It's just weird.
Come on. You're already like the biggest company in the world. You're the richest, I guess, second now. Musk's passed you again. But come on, Bezos. You did your little space rocket. Like, just go read a book, man. Just go sit on the beach. Yeah. Have a good time. Like, yeah, I don't get ambition, but
I don't get it. Sometimes I think I should be more ambitious, and I'm like,
I definitely should too.
Seems like a lot of
but
work.
I should probably have a little more ambition, but it is a lot of work. All right. Well, that takes us through the end of what we've read for this time. For next episode, we are going to read up through chapter 9. So if you're reading along with us at home, that's your assignment for next time. Read through chapter 9 of Frankenstein, if you want to keep up with just the sections that we're reading. If you enjoy what we're doing, you know, why don't you tell a friend? Bring somebody along for the ride. You're listening to this right now, whatever platform you're listening on. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just go over and click review. Give us a rating and review. That'll help other folks find the show. You found the show, so why don't you tell somebody else about the show too, and help strangers find what we're doing. If you listen to us on Spotify, you know, there are stars you can click. You don't have to write anything. It takes literally, 2 seconds? Just click on the show. Give us a star rating. You don't even have to write something. It's just a star. Go ahead and give us some 5 stars there. Let's help folks on Spotify find us. You can also follow us on social media. We are at CYSTPod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and that's it, right? Just those 3. And then email. We have email. We
do our best on social media. We're not great.
We're not terrific. We are also on Reddit. We're still eventually going to get live reads. Right now, we're doing it just on personal Reddit accounts, but we do have Reddit. CYSTPod is the username over on Reddit. Eventually, we'll get that fully squared away. You can also email us. We do get emails now, and we do get emails from people under 25. So everybody has email. Everybody knows how to use it. So you can send us your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, whatever. cystpod@gmail.com is the email address where you can reach us. Anything else for this week, Mare?
This week? No, but man, it's going to get good. It's gonna get, if you've never read Frankenstein, it's gonna blow up everything you've ever seen about Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature.
Frankenstein's monster, yeah.
In movies and cartoons. Can't wait. Can't wait for you to meet him.
Is he going to tap dance? Is the question on my mind. No, probably not. All right. Well, anyway, so it is March, and I don't have a school fun thing to say this time, so...
Spring break!
I did spring break last week, or last episode, or whatever.
We're back from spring break!
We're back from spring break. If you have any cool if you have cool spring break stories, send them to us on social media or via email. We would, all you under 25s that still go on spring break, send us your cool spring break stories. I had never had a cool spring break story. I mean, I traveled, but it was traveled with the army, so it was like work/fun.
Took students on spring break to Ireland, but like I was like in charge. We're not.
I went to Peru one year.
Person in charge, but
you know.
You went where?
I went to Peru one year.
Oh, that's right.
But that was that was an official army trip.
Yeah.
It was fun, but it was still kind of work.
I'm just as tan as I have always been after spring break.
Well, there you go. Excellent. All right. So we'll see you guys next time. This has been Classics You Slept Through.
Peace.